Hi and welcome. I'm Mich Bondesio and this is Creating Cadence, a podcast about what it really takes to work well and live well in this fast-paced world we live in. I'm the author of The Cadence Effect, and aside from this podcast, I also write over on Substack. The focus of this podcast and my writing is on reimagining work and business as part of building more regenerative, sustainable systems. It's for high-performing founders and teams, creatively minded entrepreneurs, and purpose-driven business owners who want to make a meaningful impact without sacrificing themselves or their people to burnout, hustle, and overwork. This is episode 95, the 5th of season 15. This season follows a monologue format where I'll be sharing some of the thoughts I'm exploring in my work around burnout and overwork, and how it has no place in the future of work. Whether you're listening on your commute, on a walk, or in between tasks, thanks for tuning in. Let's begin. I want to start with a question, and I'd like you to sit with it for a moment before we move on. When was the last time someone asked how you're doing and didn't want anything from you in return? Take a second. Think about it honestly. When was the last time someone asked you how you're doing and didn't want anything in return? If you can't immediately think of an answer, you're not alone. In fact, you might be experiencing the effects of something that's quietly become the norm amongst founders and mission-led leaders. And that thing is a very particular kind of loneliness. One that hides in plain sight, buried under a packed calendar, a buzzing inbox, and a LinkedIn feed full of connections. In the last episode, we explored how your nervous system pays a hidden tax for operating in overdrive. Today, we're going into the social cost of that same pattern. Because here's the thing. Burnout doesn't just exhaust you, it isolates you. And it does so gradually and so invisibly that you often don't notice that it has you in its clutches until the silence gets very loud. And then, because we can't just name the wound without looking for the remedy, we're going to talk about what to do about it. Because the antidote to this kind of isolation isn't more connection. In fact, it may be less. Stay with me, this will all make sense in a moment. So if you're ready, let's dive in. The paradox of being seen but not known. Picture this. You're booked out, 5 meetings tomorrow, 3 check-ins, 2 podcast recordings, a pitch call, a LinkedIn post to write, and that's before you've even touched the strategy document open on another tab. You are on. You are visible, you are connected. And yet late at night when the notifications finally quiet, you find yourself sitting with a question that shouldn't make any logical sense at all. Why do I feel so lonely? This is what I call the paradox of the modern founder. You can be simultaneously the most connected and the most emotionally bankrupt person in any room. You're known of, but you're not known on a deeper level. And that distinction, that's where loneliness lives. There's a crucial difference between being seen and being known. Visibility is showing up on the panel. Being known is having someone text you afterwards to ask if you're okay, because they notice a sadness in your voice when you're usually so energized. Visibility is getting 300 likes on a post. Being known is having someone say to you, "You seemed off this week. What's going on? Are you okay?" When you're always on, you erase the space for just being. And in that shift, you lose real connection, even as you accumulate more contacts. The hidden cost of constant connection. A founder I know recently told me she made over 200 LinkedIn connections that quarter, but she couldn't think of a single person in her close work network who knew her dog's name. That's not unusual, that's the norm. What we've built, with all its pings and platforms and performative busyness, creates the illusion that visible presence equals meaningful connection. But visibility has a cost. All these shallow interactions drain your social bandwidth without ever replenishing your relational reserve. And this isn't just a soft, it would be nice to feel less lonely issue. According to Vivek Murthy's 2023 advisory, weak or missing social connection carries health risks equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. The side effects of loneliness include increased cardiovascular disease, depression, and an earlier death. These aren't abstractions. This is what happens when we mistake notifications for nourishment. Research shared by Harvard Business Review shows that executives report feeling loneliness not because they lack contacts, but because they lack confidants. And there's a significant difference between the two. There's also the compounding effect of what researchers call context collapse. When you flatten yourself into a single performing self across multiple platforms, always presenting, always pitching, always packaging your story, authentic connection becomes nearly impossible. You're not showing up, you're showing off a version of yourself, and everyone in your orbit is doing the same thing back at you. Connected to this is what Harvard professor Arthur Brooks refers to as a psychogenic epidemic affecting our modern lives, where we feel that we've lost meaning by living, working, and performing in a simulation of our own creation that's dominated by hollow, shallow digital platforms. The overfunctioning trap and its link to loneliness. Overfunctioning is a term I've mentioned in earlier episodes this season, and there's a social dimension to it. Overfunctioning can look like leadership, so it gets applauded. Someone always needs something from you, and you're there. You respond, you fix, you show up. You're the reliable one, the capable one, the one with the answers. But when overfunctioning becomes your default rhythm, emotional presence recedes. The buffer of things like downtime and unstructured conversation gets shaved away, and you find you're meeting everyone else's expectations while running on empty yourself. That's when loneliness creeps in, with a slow, quiet withdrawal. In 1973, sociologist Mark Granovetter drew a distinction between weak ties, referring to your acquaintances and your broad networks, and strong ties, those close friends, the trusted confidants, the people who knew you before you became a founder. Both types of ties have value, but in a digital-first world, weak ties multiply at a pace, while strong ties quietly thin. Strong ties are where vulnerability lies, where you can say, I'm struggling, without worrying it'll end up as gossip or undermine your credibility. Strong ties require time, presence, and space that isn't transactional. And according to the Harvard Study of Adult Development, which is one of the longest-running studies on human well-being, strong ties are also the single greatest predictor of long-term happiness. Here's the catch. Cultivating weak ties is easy, but deep ties demand something most founders don't have enough of: time spent not performing. I've referred to founders a lot here, but here's why founders are particularly vulnerable to this. There are 3 dynamics that make founders especially susceptible to this particular brand of loneliness. The first is the leadership bubble. You set the tone, carry the risk, hold the future in your hands. Showing doubt feels like showing weakness, so you don't show it, and gradually you stop even sharing it with anyone. The second is identity fusion. Your work, your persona, your mission, they all become one. When work demands everything, nothing remains for what I call non-instrumental relationships. These are the connections that exist simply because they matter, not because they're useful. And the third is visibility pressure. You're expected not only to deliver, but to be seen delivering. You're visible through doing, but invisible in being. So you're chasing funding rounds, speaking on panels, arranging more meetups, and the conversations that truly matter with the friends and the peers and the partners who know you outside of your founder avatar, well, they tend to shrink to almost nothing. So ask yourself, when was the last time you spoke to someone who didn't need something from you? If you can't remember, you're not alone. You're just lonely in a very crowded room. Loneliness as a design signal. Here's the reframe I want to offer you. Loneliness isn't a personal failing. It's a design signal. Your current rhythm is telling you something. The question is whether you're listening. Redesigning for connection doesn't mean clearing your calendar and becoming a hermit, or forcing deep and meaningful conversations into every gap. It means building genuine connection into your operating system, not as an afterthought, but as infrastructure, just like your tech stack or your financial systems. So here's a few practical ideas. Create micro-connection rituals. This could be a 10-minute check-in with 2 or 3 peers, where there's no agenda, no transaction, just how are you, really? Or maybe a 2-minute voice note to a close friend at the end of a messy day. Not polished, not content, just human. Think about the 2-to-1 ratio. For every public interaction, a panel, a post, a podcast, create 2 private ones. An unscripted dinner, a walk with someone who knew you before the business, a conversation that will never become marketing content. Declutter your performative visibility. Pick one channel where you'll show up less. And with that freed bandwidth, use it for presence, not presentation. The research backs this up. Belonging and meaningful relationships don't just improve your well-being. They improve your performance, your resilience, your capacity to think creatively and lead well. Remember this reframe. Meaningful connection isn't soft, it's structural. Which brings me to the subtraction strategy. Here's where loneliness and something else entirely are deeply connected, because you can't design for deeper connection while you're still trying to cover every surface area. And that brings me to what I want to explore in the second half of today's episode, the counterintuitive power of doing less. Here's the cultural script that most founders inherit. Growth means more features, more platforms, more clients, more hours, more exposure, more everything. The toolboxes we inherit from advisors and investors are built for addition. And if you've ever been told to scale fast or attack the market, you'll know there's an almost relentless pressure to keep adding more. But what if the smarter move, both for your business and for your sanity, is subtraction? Imagine your business as a table surface. Every project, every promise, every platform you touch creates surface area. The bigger the surface, the more you must cover. The more you're exposed to weather, dents, and scratches. Every addition means more to manage, more to monitor, more of your mental bandwidth allocated to maintenance rather than meaning. Maybe this sounds familiar. Do you find yourself waking at 3 or 4 in the morning, mentally toggling between 6 product streams or 9 client projects? When you're feeling stretched like this, none of those things get the deep attention that they deserve. When I started building Creating Cadence 8 years ago, I fell into exactly this trap. A few years in, I was coaching one-to-one, running group programs, producing this podcast, delivering workshops, doing consulting with freelance comms and events work on the side, all while also trying to write a book. My calendar was ridiculously full, and my creative tank was empty. It wasn't until I paused 2 of my offerings and stepped back from social media for 3 months that I finally found the headroom to finish the book and redesign the business model that would go on to sustain me better. So subtraction, as in doing less, isn't a retreat from delivery. See it as a strategy. But traditional business cultures, especially in the West, treat subtraction as weakness. So doing less often feels almost impossible. The signals that we receive from advisors, industry pundits, and VCs are built for addition, as I've mentioned earlier. Scaling fast, growing now, capturing the market, that has its place, but so does creating space. Subtraction is also emotional, which can be challenging. You've invested time, heart, and identity into these projects. You've committed to being everywhere. You fear that if you pause, you'll lose relevance or momentum or credibility. The sunk cost fallacy also whispers that you must continue because you've already started. So, in these circumstances, you resist removal, conflating doing less with giving up. But here's the research. We make approximately 35,000 decisions each day. Every choice from reply to this email to which product line to pursue, to what's for dinner, to which route should I take to get to the meeting, chips away at our cognitive capacity. As decision load increases, decision quality falls. This causes decision fatigue, and it impacts on our performance. And don't get me started on the multitude of distractions we face in our day, which deplete us and affect our performance even more. When we're switching from task to task, it takes energy to transition what you're thinking and feeling from one to the other. But there's more. According to studies from King's College London, persistent interruptions can reduce our IQ by 10%. Interestingly, research on what's called time affluence shows that feeling you have enough time is more predictive of well-being and creative output than having more money or working more hours. But constant switching of tasks with thousands of micro-decisions and too many moving parts means you may be squandering your leadership bandwidth and your IQ on low-value choices. As Oliver Burkeman argues in his book 4,000 Weeks, every yes is a no to something else. When we say yes to everything, we're actually saying no to depth. So complexity isn't a strategy, it can be a liability. And that's why subtraction is important. So practically, what does subtraction actually look like? Start by auditing your project portfolio. List every active initiative, then ask 2 questions for each one. What's the impact if I step back from this for 90 days? And what's the cost if I continue it for another year? If something is neither essential nor meaningful, pause it, or archive it, or kill it. See this as intentional selection, not abandonment. Then apply the 80-20 principle, ruthlessly. 20% of your initiatives are delivering 80% of your outcomes. Identify that 20%, Then ask what you can kill, pause, or delegate in the remaining 80. You can also try subtractive OKRs. Don't just set objectives for what to build, set explicit key actions for what to stop. Maybe you set a quarterly objective to reclaim strategic capacity by eliminating low-leverage client work. Or maybe that means you retire 1 or 2 service offerings, or reduce your client roster so you can focus more deeply on select relationships with trusted partners. Perhaps you consolidate your project communication from 5 tools to 2. This can free up time for you and your team for creative ideation or strategic problem solving, and also reduce the context switching that I spoke about, which leads to decision fatigue. And finally, consider a decision diet. This is about design constraints that help you eliminate choice rather than multiply it. So for example, meet new clients only 2 afternoons per week. Publish on 1 platform, not 3. Fewer channels of engagement in all parts of your work means fewer decisions and more thinking room. From isolation to integration. So here's where we bring both threads together, loneliness and subtraction. Because they're not separate problems, they're symptoms of the same underlying design flaw. When you're covering too much surface area, you have no bandwidth left for depth. Not depth in your work and not depth in your relationships. You end up being everywhere and truly present nowhere. Loneliness isn't a personal failure. It's your physiology asking for change. And the answer isn't more socializing alongside more doing. It's creating genuine spaciousness by removing what isn't essential so that what remains can actually breathe. Connection isn't a bonus feature of sustainable leadership. It's part of the infrastructure, just like your strategy, your tech stack, or your team culture. And like any infrastructure, it needs rhythm, pulses of doing, pauses of being, and space for depth and recovery. Being busy doesn't mean that you're not lonely. Sometimes it means that you're so busy that the relationships that do the heavy lifting, the ones that keep you grounded and human, have no room left to exist. So start designing for deeper connection, and start by creating space. So if your calendar is full and your heart still whispers, "Why am I so lonely?" don't turn inward and blame yourself. See it as feedback. Your system is asking for change. And if you're drowning in commitments that once felt essential, remember, subtraction isn't about shrinking your ambition. It's about concentrating your impact, moving from more to smarter, sustainable, spacious. Not just for you, but for your team too, because you are the role model for them, whether you intend to be or not. This week, I want to leave you with a few questions to sit with. Who in your life knows you outside of your founder identity, and when did you last give that relationship the time it deserves? And what is one thing on your project list that you could pause for 90 days, not to fail, but to breathe? In the next episode, we're going to explore something that follows naturally from all of this. If subtraction creates space and deeper connection restores us, what does that make possible? We're going to look at what it really means to redefine productivity, not as output, not as hours, but as inner capacity. Because when you stop measuring your worth by how much you do, you start discovering how much more you're actually capable of. Until then, I invite you to look honestly at your surface area, in your work and in your relationships. You might be surprised by what you find when you finally let a little light in. So thanks for listening. I'll be back soon with the next episode in the series, but a few quick notes before you go. If you found this episode helpful, please like or rate the podcast wherever you listen to it. It helps others to find us. You'll find out more about my work at creatingcadence.co, and you can grab a copy of my book via thecadenceeffect.com. You can also read more of my articles at creatingcadence.substack.com. The Creating Cadence podcast is produced by Bondesio Media and is available on Apple, Amazon, Spotify, and YouTube. It's edited on Descript, and this season's music is from Changing Their Minds on Premium Beat. So until next time, keep moving forwards with courage, curiosity, and cadence. Bye for now.